Hey guys, Mike, on-site paintless dent removal here. Just trying to show you a repair today. I'm working on this Honda Ridgeline for one of my customers.
As you can see, we have a sharp dent on the body line. This was caused by the customer loading a 2x4. And then we have a smaller dent here. And there's also a couple smaller dents, almost from being leaned on, possibly waves that are in the panel. And just to make this repair look more clean, I decided to fix those as well. So here we have the light set up on the dent. As you can see, I'm pushing the dent, starting with that one that was up top above the gas door. We're starting in the center of the dent, and we are working our way around in a spiral pattern. You don't want to form lines, and you don't want to form any other patterns like that. You want to have an erratic movement. I apologize for the silence, but I work with the detailer. We split a shop, so we do dents and details, which works out really well for both of our businesses. But unfortunately, I'm repairing this vehicle in the middle of the day, so we have the air compressor going, the air gun blowing, and general chat discussion going on as well. That's not going to be fit for this. One of the biggest things to mention is the placement of the light is the most important. So when you first start the dent, you can see where my board is placed. It's pulled away from the door, the bedside there. It's pulled probably a good 5 inches away, and it's a good distance away from the dent. But it's also close enough to me to see the center of the damage. As you progress and the dent is diminishing, you want to move the board closer to the panel and farther away from you. And then you'll see in some of the video footage that I actually have to move it far away to where you are not able to see the video anymore because I can't capture it without getting me in the way. Now this dent here is very simple. This is very routine, and it's almost like a light wave. A lot of times people cause these by filling up at the gas station, leaning over the side of your truck, and other things like that. As I move the board there, you can see a couple other dents that were in front. There's the dent on the body line. You can see that one. Pretty sharp, but obviously something that is repairable. And if you look, there's that black dot on my board, right center left. There's a couple small dents you can see there. That's what I'm setting up right now. You can see it in the lines as it's moving back and forth. Alright, so I'm working up top, as you can see there, just kind of getting a couple of those light waves out. And the board is pretty far back. I'm also standing very far back because where I have the camera placed right now. So I'm at the back using a long rod from the taillight area almost. If you were standing closer, you would move the light back farther instead. Also, this truck is extremely easy to work on the bedsides because it has holes along the top. It's very accessible. Another important thing to start off, you can always push harder. Don't over push and make a high spot. It's going to be harder to repair that. Start softer and you will see. I always tell people when they first start doing P.D.R. to get a practice hood. So if you go to a body shop, you can usually find a hood. You can even offer to buy it for a few bucks because scrap metal is actually extremely low right now in the States. But you can set that up on a hood stand, and you can get started with some pretty basic tools without spending a fortune and seeing if it's something that you like. I would suggest going out for training in the future as well, but just to test the waters, it would be a good idea just to start out with a basic rod, a light board, and get a hood and some sort of holder. If you have a junk car, you could also just use that. Here I'm using a blending hammer just to sort of blend out the damage. A blending hammer is awesome because it gives you such a great distance away from the damage, so you can really stand back and see the surrounding damage to the dent that you can't see if you're standing too close. I should also mention it's much easier to repair this damage when you don't have a camera sort of in the way of the repair. I mean, I could really fly through something like that. You can see the holes along the top. That's all accessible to the bedside. And the top rail cap comes off with one screw, and then it slides back towards the tail light. It's like one of the most simple to remove. No broken tabs or anything like that. Alright, so you can see up top, and then in the middle, there's another small dent. Just like a small wave, probably from just leaning over the truck. Very common on pickup trucks. I've moved everything back now, so we're set up pretty far back. And again, I'm using a long double bend rod to remove this right now. So the dent actually doesn't look that large, maybe 1.5 inches. but if you look at the surrounding buckle and affected area, it's probably close to 3 inches. And it's always more difficult to repair damage on the body line or edges, especially edges of panels where the edge has been kicked in. I prefer to always use a tool rather than glue pulling. I know a lot of guys will start off with glue on a lot of different damage, and if you can get a tool on it, that's your best bet. You're going to get the best repair, and you're going to have the least amount of risk of pulling paint. Now, for these repairs, I've been using a heat gun. It was actually, it's right around October 2nd when I was filming this. And in Connecticut, it's starting to get kind of cold.
Hey guys, Mike, on-site paintless dent removal here, just repairing this vehicle on the Bodyline dent. I'm going to show you the repair of that damage caused by a 2x4. So, before this, you can see the before and after and the during.
So the heat gun's running to make the paint more soft, less likely to crack. And if it's something that I'm repairing in my shop, I always have a heat gun on it if it's at all sharp. It just makes it that much safer. If I'm on the road and I'm doing a repair on a dealership lot, I use a torch, just a propane torch. They do have cordless heat guns, but they don't have a lot of power, and they don't last very long. But if you're doing something quick, that could be a good option for you. Another thing I'm looking into is DeWalt makes a battery bank, and I think you put in 4 6-amp-hour batteries into it, and it runs at 1800 watts continuous with, I think, a 3600 watt peak. And so you could actually run a heat gun off of that, because most heat guns run at a maximum of 1500 watts. So in a mobile setting, it's just really nice to have the ability to heat this up, especially when it gets to be cold outside and you don't want to have to keep using a torch. And a torch also doesn't look as professional. Imagine you're working on someone's high-end Audi and you have a open flame going across the door panel as they're watching. Just not the greatest thing. So I started this dent out with a Dentcraft 36-inch rod with a what we call red cherry tip on it. And it's a soft tip that moves a lot of metal, but it doesn't move it very sharp. One thing to keep in mind is as you're using a heat gun on it, that tip becomes very soft, so you can start to poke through it and it actually tear a hole in the rubber. A lot of guys use tape, either duct tape or Tessa tape, and it makes it so that you get a soft push without the possibility of pushing through it as easily. You can also put the tape right over the red cherry tip. Here is a knockdown with a red cherry tip on it to give you an idea. And I'm knocking down that lower buckle of the damage. Again, moving the light, very important. When you first start off, just make sure you start slow with the knockdown. You don't need to hit it very hard, and you don't have to move around as quickly. As you get better, you can move faster, and it becomes more natural of a feeling. Also, you get more control, I find, with a hammer and knockdown than you do with the blending hammer. But they both have their own purposes. So this is the Shane Jack's XL jackhammer, which is it's a well-balanced blending hammer. I've also used a couple carbon fiber ones, but this is my primary go-to. And I have a small, I think it's a dent it might be, I'm trying to think who it is. The company on the Dent Technologies, maybe. Not gonna be very easy to find one of those anymore. They're not in business. But that's the small tip I use on there. And then the other side, I use a Edgy Tools, I think it is. The new black tips. So you can look into that. He has a great selection of tools as well. Here I am bringing the metal up to the body line. So this dent was pretty sharp, and you can't just push right on the body line. Most of the time you will crack the paint. If you do that, you need to walk the metal to the body line. If it was a softer dent, you could start on the body line and rough it out, and then finish up with sharper tools. And I've been doing this for about 7 years now, and bodyline dents are the most challenging, especially on some of these German cars, the BMW doors and quarter panels. Even those are still extremely challenging for me at times when they're a really hard hit. I'm switching between a Dentcraft 36 with a cherry tip, and I'm using an A1, just a basic rod. I think it's a little bit longer than 36. I think it might be a 42 inch or so. Has a much sharper tip, and that's what I'm going to finish this dent with. Here I'm just checking the temperature to make sure. You don't want to get the paint too hot, obviously. You can burn the paint. You should always take caution when using a heat gun, because you can also damage plastic trim, and other things of that nature. You can see the condensation on the panel there because it is pretty cold out. Even in the shop, we haven't turned the heat on yet. It's not that cold. Now, one thing is that you have to keep in mind is you have to cross-check your damage, and I will be cross-checking this later on, very briefly. I also tilt the light at different angles because you will have missed lows, especially depending upon how you are actually working the damage. It's best to work this straight on. But I just went through the top. I didn't remove the tail light. Through the tail light probably would have gave me a better straight on as I got closer to the tail light. I mean, at this point, most customers would probably be pretty satisfied, honestly, but I always try to get the dent as good as possible when it's for retail. Here I'm right above the top of the body line, kind of moving that metal towards the body line still a little bit, and I'm going to come back in and do some more knocking down on this. There also is a nick in the paint. Anytime that there's a nick in the paint, you got to be more careful with it cracking. There I am knocking down the high spots that I created. I'm using a B2 tip plastic. I believe that's from Dentcraft. Dentcraft has a lot of interchangeable tips that I really like. There's several manufacturers of tools. A couple of the main ones are A1 Tools, Ultra Dent, Dentcraft. There's another company, Dent Gear, went out of business. I really like some of their tools that they had. Dent Technologies, Edgy Tools. Dent Technologies makes some great stuff, and then a whole bunch of crazy stuff happened with their company. Had a big fire, and kind of a shame because they had some great tools that they were making. But that was kind of a strange thing in the industry for sure. I'm sure there's other tools out there as well, but those are the primary ones that I make use of. There's other companies too that create tools for all those tools. Oh, Anson's another great company. So the angle that I was actually working this dent, I couldn't quite see the same that I can see in the video here now, but there is a distinct line that I can definitely see, and I realized it later on as I was repairing this. So here I'm using the metal tip on the blending hammer. It gives it more of a finer hit than the padded rubber tip. And just moves the metal differently. And you'll be able to try out different techniques obviously once you're familiar with it. One thing I find that is helpful is you can check the bottom half of your from the line, the body line down below. You can straighten the board so it's in line flat, and then you can do it at a whatever the angle the body line is. You can check the top as well, and then you basically want to check your board in a few other directions as well. So if you turn the board and you run it along the body line just above it and just below it, you can catch missed lows that way as well. Might not look like it's really moving a lot of metal, but it is. At this point, my light is back pretty far, and it's very close to the panel. It's hard for me to film this damage because I'm basically in the way of the shot, so I just have the camera set back. You can see I just changed the angle of the light there, like I was talking about earlier. And there's really not that much more left to this now. So I do about 75% of my work is retail work, and then the rest is a few body shops and a couple car dealerships. My main focus is to bring stuff to the shop, and so that's what I concentrate on. And I basically only work for people that I want to work for. So I work for some of the greatest guys in the business. And when I go into a body shop, they will take everything apart for me. They send customers direct to me. In exchange, I give them a good rate when I repair stuff for them. I don't give it away, but they get a discount compared to some of the other shops. It's a nice feeling when you don't have to rely on wholesale work to get by. When I first started, I worked for another company, and all I did was wholesale in the beginning, obviously because the quality was not quite there yet. And then my second year in, I was doing a ton of retail work in a very busy shop, as well as taking care of body shops, car dealerships, and everything else. So I dealt with a big auto group, and they had Subarus, Volvo, Dodge, Volkswagen, and it's just amazing how much work there is to do out on the car lot when you have a few accounts like that. I mean, they can keep you busy for days. I remember I used to do like 30 dents on I Tuesdays and Thursdays I'd go, so I do like 30 dents between all the dealerships. And obviously when you're first starting out, you can just go to pretty much the lowest quality dealerships first. They're going to pay the least amount, but they also aren't going to have the highest expectations usually. Now, if they do have super high expectations, then you can just leave because there's tons of other dealerships out there. But they usually have a pretty good understanding that the price is going to be low and the quality is going to be on the lower end as well. It just gets you a lot of metal to work on, and you can make some money while you're doing it. I'm sure in later videos I'll be discussing business plans as well as different avenues you can go to generate more money and have more connections with people. So now you're just really working the dent at different angles, trying to cross-check. I'm going to flip the board around later on and look at it from the other angles. You just want to make sure that you catch any lows along that body line. Obviously, I don't advise starting on bodyline dents as they are pretty difficult depending on how sharp the damage is. Alright, so I've turned the light around. I'm checking it from the other side now. When you're first starting out, you want to do this more often. Check the different angles.
Alright guys, as you can see, I'm going to show you a video pan here. The damage came out great. Really sharp damage caused by the corner of a 2x4. This is a Honda Ridgeline. Luckily we had good access along the top here, and I will show you the after. Right on the body line there, there's a small scratch in the paint. I haven't polished it or anything. So, great results. And I also took care of a couple other ones that were in there as well. So while I'm in there, let me just, he was only concerned with 2 or 3 of those, primarily the one on the body line.